gentlemen, allow me to warmly welcome you to the jubileum 10th edition of Visegrad Youth Forum conference. My name is Alžbeta Pupalova. I'm the program coordinator in the Euroatlantic Center, and I will lead today's discussion. I'm sorry, I had some echo hearing from the application. Euroatlantic Center is an independent Slovak non-governmental organization that brings together professionals and students from the field of international relations and security. Euroatlantic Center was established in 1899 by a group of students in Banská Bystrica, and to present it's fully led by university students. Visegrad Youth Forum itself is our flagship project, and despite we were hoping to organize Visegrad Youth Forum in physical form in Banská Bystrica, the current COVID-19 restrictions because of these restrictions we had to adapt and held a discussion online. Despite this, I hope it will be a fruitful discussion with many interesting views and positions. Actually, it's held online for the second time, and despite this, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you who find time in your schedules and attended this conference. Now, I would like to proceed with introduction of our honored guests and today's speakers. Mr. Sebastian Schäfer, Managing Director of Institute for Danube Region and Central Europe from Vienna. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Then Ms. Alisa Kizekova, Senior Research at Institute of International Relations from Prague. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning from Prague.
Then Mrs. Olga Gyarfashova, Associate Professor at Institute of European Studies and International Relations, Comenius University in Bratislava. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and good morning to everybody from Bratislava.
And our fourth speaker is Professor Braden Ebingor-Nelu from Institute of International and Political Studies of Corvinus University in Budapest. Welcome and thank you.
Good morning from Budapest.
I would now like to give the word to Ms. Mariana Neupauer, from Visegrad from the International Visegrad Fund, who will give us a keynote speech. The word is yours.
Good morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So, dear friends, if I may, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning at this 10th edition of the Visegrad Youth Forum, which is being supported also by the International Visegrad Fund. It's not for the first time that we've been supporting this forum. Not every edition we did support, but we did support this edition because firstly, it's the 10th edition, it's anniversary edition. And second, naturally, you have a topic that is very relevant for us. You are celebrating the 30th anniversary of Visegrad cooperation. And thank you for this, because we are all Visegrad people, whether we like it or not. So we have to think about the space where we live, and that's very important for us, how to think, how to coordinate, how to form our future. So if you allow me, I would like to give you a couple of thoughts, or some food for thought for our followers primarily, which should be young people from this region. And I hope you will find something interesting in the words I want to say to you. If not, that maybe you will find something that is maybe controversial, or if you just find something that you want to think about, that would be already wonderful. And I wish all of you very successful panel discussions, very nice sessions, even though it's online, but we just have to cope with what we have. So as I said, dear colleagues, it's the anniversary year, the 2021 for the Visegrad group. It's been here for 30 years, which is already quite nice history of a regional group. In February 2021, the prime ministers of the Visegrad group from the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland, of course, met under the Polish presidency in Krakow, and they signed a declaration which was to celebrate, to mark this 30th anniversary. And in this declaration, actually, they are acknowledging with satisfaction that there has been successful development of the V4 cooperation over the past years. And, quote, they declare their readiness to further continue to the success of the European project, unquote. I would like to stop, I would like to dwell on this statement and those three words that are therein. It's the success, satisfaction, and readiness. Firstly, the success. How do we measure success of a regional cooperation grouping? Are there any criteria? Are there any benchmarks? Not that much, I would say, in this very format of Visegrad cooperation, which is primarily non-formalized cooperation, but it's very much mainstream. Its original mission, and you will all know it, I'm sure, was to become a part of Europe with all that it takes. It was Euro integration that led together the three countries at the beginning, and then later, of course, with the separation of Czechoslovakia, the four countries to join the EU, to join NATO, to be a part of Europe, as I'm saying, as the whole project of this wonderful project. And we succeeded, which is already a success. Does this mean that Visegrad cooperation was successful, or is it successful still today? Some may say that once it has fulfilled this mission, it's done. Well, I don't think so, and we see that the majority of political leaders do not think so either, because the cooperation has been here ever since we joined EU and NATO, and it's been already a couple of years. So what's the purpose of this cooperation? That would be a question maybe to some of you to think about. There were many topics raised by various political leaders as they are changing. It was defense. There were some thoughts about having more coordinating defense policies. We are now discussing, recently it's been discussed, for instance, the cooperation to tackle the COVID consequences. There are discussions, of course, about energy security, about infrastructure connection. So there's a lot ongoing, not to forget, of course, the so much mentioned topics of migration during the big migration wave in 2015-16, and also nowadays we see the strong signs of solidarity. So you see it's a mixture of various topics, it's a mixture of ideas, it's a mixture of options, but and that's maybe the charm, and maybe that's the success of Visegrad cooperation, and that means that if the countries want to cooperate and they find that the consensus there, then they do cooperate. So as much as they didn't agree on many issues, they do agree now, and that's I think it's very nice to hear on the issue of migration, on the crisis that we see on the Polish borders, for instance. And there are various other topics that could be mentioned. As I said, it's given by the fact that if they agree to cooperate, they do cooperate. And this has been here for 30 years, which means whether we like it or not, there has been always cooperation on various levels, which we cannot see, for instance, in the S3 format, because there are coordination meetings on all levels of ministries. It's getting natural. So therefore, I think, again, whether we like it or not, the future of Visegrad cooperation will be here, because people have those natural contacts on desk level of officers. The original idea was to stay here in the region to discuss, to get into to succeed in the Euro integration, but we also managed to go beyond this European, Central European dimension. We are cooperating also in other regions, not least in the region of Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership. We are sharing our experience also by means of the Visegrad Fund, but not only Visegrad Fund. There are also other initiatives under the flagship of V4 that are taking place there. One example for all is the Conference on the Future of Europe, where Western Balkans is not officially part of this discussion, but the V4 is at least arguing for their participation, and we're trying to get better connected with them also in this dialogue. The second word I mentioned was satisfaction. Satisfaction, you might know, some of you will be students of diplomacy, I suppose, in Banska Bystrica or elsewhere. You know that to say that you acknowledge something with satisfaction, well, it has levels how you can express your satisfaction or joy. So there are some limitations in this joy that we read in these lines, but that's a political statement. The question is how the society sees the Visegrad cooperation. Are we satisfied? Are people satisfied? I don't have that much time to develop on this, but I'm very happy that we have Ms. Gyarfasova in your panel, who I think will be mentioning some aspects of the public poll that we were financing and their institute was implementing. So we have fresh data to see how people perceive Visegrad cooperation, what's important for them. And again, very nice for us to see it was that it's very natural for everyone in this Visegrad region, or for the majority in this Visegrad region, to talk to their neighbors, be it again Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland. The third, so I see I'm running out of time. I try to speak slowly so that you can understand, because we are online, so it will take me a bit longer. So I'll just jump this. I'll leave this, those explanations to Ms. Gyarfasova. I hope she will not be angry with me. And the third word I wanted to mention, that's the readiness. The readiness that was mentioned in this declaration, and the readiness, which means, are we ready to be active enough? We are declaring we are, but what does it mean in practice? Are we ready to react to the challenges that we see nowadays? That's a big question. That will be for sure a point in many discussions today. But I would say that we are. And I will give you just one fact, which will, I think, prove very important in those discussions to think whether or not. The Visegrad cooperation on political level has been there. It has its ups and downs. But also Visegrad cooperation takes place on the level of civil society. And that's the role actually of our Visegrad Fund. We are here to support the bottom-up approaches. We are here to support the cooperation in between our peoples on basically, yes, you like. We have the seven focus areas, which are very good, and we are here for the past 21 years, investing more than 100 million into civil society cooperation, more than 6,000 projects we have supported in this region, also in the Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership, as I mentioned, but that was just less than 1/4 of all our projects. Outside on the corridor, and once we will be out of those lockdowns, you're all very heartily invited to Bratislava to discuss with us. But outside the corridor, we have a map. We have a map with all our projects, which shows it's a wonderful map network of connections. And if there's a dot on the map, which means there was a project, it means that in this project we had at least 2 cross-border, but standardly 3 entities from 3 diverse V4 countries. Who had to cooperate on these projects. So in fact,
I'm sorry for
we actually had at least
power. I'm very sorry for interrupting you, but
3 people, organizations.
But we have some issues with
And if we are doing this for 21 years, you can imagine there is already huge network of hands. And those people were usually young people, of course, or people from the civil society who we deem very important and who are actually our future. So I will stop here. Just I will give you a short conclusion because I'm a bit older.
Ms. Nepar, I'm very sorry for
Well, I'm definitely older than most of our viewers.
We have some issues, probably with the
and I think that
probably there were some issues with connection from Bratislava. I'm very sorry for this. At the beginning, there was everything all right, so I'm not sure what exactly happened. But I will continue with some logistic information, and probably Ms. Nepar will join us a bit later. For participants joining us here via Zoom, you can ask your questions in the chat and I will choose some of them later, or you can simply take off your hand and ask a question. This discussion is also live streamed on the YouTube panel from other students and general public. So as well, you can write your questions there, and I will try to pick some of them for our speakers. And now probably Ms. Nepar wouldn't join us again. I would like to start with the discussion and use my position as a moderator and probably ask a question which is related to our today's topic, and that's what are the biggest lessons learned from the V4 from the past 30 years of its existence, and what are the best perspectives for its future. Maybe we could start with Mr. Schäfer.
All right, sure. Thank you. It's interesting to start with an outside perspective from the Visegrad countries, maybe as I work for an institution that is based in Austria, which is not part of the V4. But when we look back and also pick up what has been mentioned in the keynote speech, I would distinguish here 3 things. First of all, the Visegrad Cooperation has been started with the aim of fostering the European integration of Central Europe. And this is a goal that has been achieved and was very successful. And then the cooperation itself transformed with assisting also other countries of joining the European Union, amongst others. What we have seen, though, in recent years, especially when we look at the Visegrad Cooperation from the outside, is that this initial idea has sort of vanished from the perception of what Visegrad is. And unfortunately, and I want to stress that this is, of course, not true, because the Visegrad group is a very diverse group, but the association that is, especially with relations to European integration, perpetuated in the discussion in the recent years is that the countries are the ones who are actually undermining European values and European principles. And this is a sad development when we think back on the initial idea of Visegrad cooperation. The third point to start this discussion off is, of course, also the relevance of this format. And when we look at cooperation on a European level, we see a lot of these different minilateral formats. Visegrad is celebrating its 30th anniversary, which is quite long. There are longer standing minilateralisms within the European Union. Benelux, for instance, is a minilateral format that has been started before European integration actually came into being. And there are other cooperations which make sense to, in a enlarging European Union, at least until 2016, in an ever enlarging European Union, that you find smaller entities to coordinate policies on a European level. But what we could also see is that in the recent years, these minilateral formats have been funded left and right, and came into being, which, from my perspective, do not necessarily yield better results, because minilateral formats put an additional burden on the governmental administration. You need to organize these meetings, you need to prepare these meetings, and we should return to focusing on yielding results rather than formatting ad hoc groupings and discussing of enlargement of existing minilateral formats. And here the Austrian perspective maybe comes also into play, where there have been discussion that Austria maybe should join the Visegrad countries, where there are other formats that overlap here, Slavkov, Central European 5, and so on and so forth. I think, per se, to sum up, cooperation in minilateral formats is good, but we should avoid duplication of efforts and make results more visible. The Visegrad cooperation is a success story when it comes to its initial goal of fostering European integration of the Central European countries. It has potential to extend this to the countries of the Western Balkan, and also in the relationship to the countries of the Eastern Partnership. But we should really try to change the perception of the Visegrad group as some sort of the outlier, the troublemaker on a European level, which is absolutely not true for each and every Visegrad participating country. Individually, that's a different story, but maybe we hear that from the other panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your point of view, Ms. Schäfer. Now I would like to apologize once again to Ms. Executive Director, Ms. Neparova, for technical problems. As I can see that she has rejoined us again. I would like to thank her very much for her contribution. And now I would like to move the word to Ms. Gizekova.
Thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative to be part of this interaction. I see some familiar faces already from our e-lecture So I hope we can continue with our conversation. Back then I connected from Berlin, today it's Prague, and I was hoping to be in Banská Bystrica, which is my university alma mater since I graduated from the faculty there. In any case, I actually appreciate that Mr. Schäfer had a first word as an outsider, because we obviously need reflection and we need different perspectives. And sometimes when we are in our close circle, we don't see all the angles and also the dynamics. We might be overconfident how much we want to hug Austria and be friends, very constructively and very closely. But, we also have to realize we are working in the European context in the EU, and that's us as well. We often, I think, not just in Central Europe here, but also other parts of Europe, we tend to look at Brussels as them and us as us, but we are all them, we are all part of the EU and we form it. And I think this topic is so important because I'm going to link it also with the topic of the future of Europe, which is ongoing at the moment with citizens, and many people are not aware of it. So I have just recently returned from Brussels, where as V4 countries, we met a few representatives of commissioners, and we're talking about the V4, we're talking about the approaches to future of Europe, how to be constructive, what the weak points are, and how to move forward. So I think this goes hand in hand, because as you rightly pointed out, we had quite a successful story. Some milestones were outlined. And we also came to the point where I believe the V4 has been unfortunately hijacked by the political elites, especially the prime ministers, and they are not always perceived as constructive players. They might be perceived as doing the good thing for some parts of the political spectrum in their countries, but not necessarily in that mindset of being integrative with the rest of Europe. Mind you, I don't think personally that EU has everything worked out as well. It's a work in progress. And so I think after 30 years, and I feel lucky in that sense that I have experienced the whole length of this, project. Obviously the students connecting here, I imagine you were not born. So you walk into this discussion from a different perspective again. But seeing it from the start, I think we were in a position early on, as I call it, the agenda takers. We were taking what was given to us. We had to adapt. We had to harmonize our legislation and all our processes and interactions. We had to start to interact, even as young people traveling for study abroad programs, to learn about different educational systems and get the benefits of learning different languages and so forth. So we have done all that, and I think that's been a big success. But there is a point when we learn to be more confident and we realize we need to speak up. And I'm originally Slovak, and from my background, growing up, the confidence sometimes was lacking. We felt like we might not have enough to say. We might feel a bit unsure about our language skills. I started learning mine from Beatles songs, from tapes, which is ridiculous now because the lyrics are sometimes not making much sense. But saying that, it was a lot of hard work. And so we reach a point where we are comparable with what the others have maybe in the West and other parts of Europe. And the question is how we will interact with this space. Are we going to be constructive players and try to meet others halfway with big topics such as migration crises or quality of food around Europe or participation in missions? So all of this is relevant. What kind of people are we going to be in that negotiation? And how are we going to suggest solutions? So moving forward, trust me, as think tankers, a network of 8 think tanks for Think Visegrad platform, and I coordinate one of the Czech parts. We are sometimes struggling to find within V4 common grounds, to find agreement on what was successful. It's not always easy because we get really influenced by what the media projects, but also how the political leadership interacts. There was recently a spat between Poland and Czech Republic in the border area. Long story short, the prime ministers were as far as saying, I don't want to be part of the Visegrad meeting because I don't want to be in the same room where the other man is breathing the air. So if that's the kind of approach, that's already difficult for us to suggest some solutions for constructive collaboration. We are very reflective and we can point this out. There is no doubt that some might be cautious, but we are not using any filters when we are reflective. So with that in mind, we have recently talked about, let's say, how the US and China dynamics and the rivalry impacts our space as well, and vis-a-vis European Union, because we do not want to see V4 isolated. And I understand our colleague from Austria having that sort of a sentiment that we might creating a microspace that is taking away the resources and so forth. Not necessarily. I mean, when we were looking at and we are closely looking at the public opinion, even in these countries, the European poll was showing us clearly that all V4 countries, when they had US, China, or Russia, and European Union side by side, all of them chose EU as the main space that they trusted to work within and with, So that was, and there was a lot of anxiety about what the influence might be from Russia, China, and so forth. And surprisingly, Slovakia was still more trusting, obviously, of Russia than some other countries for different reasons. But we are looking closely at what the people are saying also. And we are suggesting, look at that as well. Moving forward, V4 really needs to include the voices of public, because right now people are really concerned about the pandemic. They're concerned about the changes probably in government's approaches and how the restrictions are voiced or not voiced and how that affects daily lives. And also the rights that we acquired over the 30 years, whether they are being restricted. So this is very important. To what extent the decision makers are going to pay attention to this, I can't influence, but we can always try, obviously. And one of the big portfolios that is coming up is how we will get out of this pandemic. And that's going to be a big agenda for V4 in terms of economic recovery, but also it gives us a chance to actually fix some of the long-term structural issues that we have. We have amazing, I think, open book now when it comes to in what bad shape some of our healthcare systems are and others, technology in schools to make sure everybody's connected properly and so forth, has the means and access. So we have all this in full display. We also have in full display the case of people's mental state, because many of our public is struggling on different kind of levels. It's not just an issue of some, but it's many people have now rediscovered that with this kind of social isolation, how much we can even suggest to people-to-people relations as a part of a joint collaboration. If you want to create people-to-people relations, you really have to meet and connect. And with the pandemic, that's been really hard. So saying that, we have everything in a full display, and I think V4 can, within the EU space, to start working on some of this. Again, there are other topics such as climate change or digital transformation and so forth. When we looked at the V4's future contributions and what they can do, as our colleague said, we should be looking at the EU more attentively and start participating in debates how to form policies, even towards the big players. There is not enough transparency in the transatlantic relations with the US, and also there is not enough proper discussion about the approach to China. And this is a problem in general moving forward, because China and US are formulating their foreign policy based on what's happening domestically in their countries. They are not really paying attention how we will feel about this. And so we have to reassess, and we have to find a way how we can operate in this space and how it's going to affect us, because at the end of the day, many of us feel the US is still our security protector. And as such, to what extent they are debating us. Our colleague said, let's not create other frameworks. Well, there is the 3Cs initiative, which was proposed by Poland and Croatia. Let's just say US promised funds to fend off even Russia and energy security in Europe. The question is to what extent we want to join these participations. What I believe we should be doing for V4 space and Central Europe is fix our infrastructure. We don't have any high-speed railways here, and I think that would benefit the regions as well. And we also project that there should be more collaboration in local communities and border areas and towns. We call it paradiplomacy, because that's not really utilized. There is a potential, but that regional collaboration will need to be more stronger. But I don't want to hijack the time, so I'll gladly join the discussion later. But those were some of my key points. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your ideas of targeting the V4 countries. Now maybe Mrs. Jarfashova, as you're an expert for opinions on V4 as your representatives in the e-learning, maybe your point of the view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks once again. Good morning to everybody. And yes, for this, my first contribution, I will concentrate on the inhabitants and on the public opinion views. And as Mrs. Nopower already said, so I was the one who co-authored the project and the survey, which was funded by the International Visegrad Fund very recently this year. But not only this year, but we have data also from previous years, so we can see the trends, how the perception of the Visegrad is developing and where we recently are. And once again, the cover of this book, these 4 white quadrants, it's not a reference to the Russian avant-garde artist Malevich, and also they are not empty as they are seen, but just to show it and to remind you that you can download the entire publication on the website of the Institute for Public Affairs with a very easy webpage, www.ivo.sk, and it's also in English and Slovak. So for this short contribution, I would like to focus on just 2 aspects of this inhabitants perspective. And one is the visibility and the awareness of Visegrad. So that means to what extent people know about it. They know that their countries are members of this grouping of this cooperation, and we see that really within especially within last 5-6 years, it really in most countries, actually in all 4 countries, I'm looking at the graph, the majority of citizens know what is Visegrad cooperation. What is interesting, and this is something more critical within this positive finding, is that this increase was very significant after 2015. And we have to admit that this negative image of Visegrad, which came with the migration crisis, really made the brand of Visegrad not only outside of Visegrad, that means for the European Union and all the consequences we faced, but also within the Visegrad. So that means that the public felt strengthened by that, okay, now we could face this migration crisis together, but not only that, but certain opposition vis-a-vis the European Union, what definitely was not a good development. And additional short note that this increase of visibility of Visegrad was most visible in Hungary. And recently, Hungary is the country where Visegrad is the most, or is most present issue, or at least the citizens perceive it as something very present in the political discourse. And maybe in the discussion we could say more about it, or maybe also our Hungarian colleague could say more about the background. Other aspect is, okay, so Visegrad is visible, but is it also relevant? And this is what we discussed also at the presentation of this book earlier this year. And we have to admit that the relevance is much weaker than the visibility, because okay, so the inhabitants of Visegrad, so they want to have cooperation in economy, in trade, in cooperation in environmental protection, and so on and so on. But when it comes, for example, to how to cope pandemic COVID-19, so the relevance really went down, and here the relevance or the competence of the national governments was much stronger, even in the case when the cooperation, at least the border regimes and so on and so on, would be very useful for all Visegrad citizens. My second aspect or second bunch of findings from this much broader survey is mutual trust, because this is something what we value very much. So we know that all these 4 countries went through very turbulent history. They were not always friends and allies, but sometimes also enemies, and sometimes really the historical legacy is very complicated. What is a very positive news that based on this survey, so we could say that the mutual trust among all these 4 countries is very high. So that means the highest trust of the Slovaks, for example, is to the Czechs, to the Poles, of the Czechs, also to Slovaks. So that means it's not only high, but it's symmetrical, it's mutual. So what makes the ties between the 4 countries very stable and I think sustained, even in spite of all the political turbulences which were here and might be also in the future. So that means the neighbors remained neighbors with all the positive among them. And short note to our Austrian colleague that Austrians are within this trust or within this positive, as I called it, sociogram, that Austrians, especially for Hungarians, Czechs and Slovaks, it's really among the most trusted and most reliable partners. Also on a positive note here, so and all we know that the weakest tie within these 4 allies used to be the relation between Hungarians and the Slovaks. due to Hungarian minority issues and also some other issues, and these improved significantly. So that means it's still not the level of Czech and Slovaks mutual understanding, which of course has a different historical background, but there is a huge improvement, and I think this is something what is very pressure for entire Central Europe and European Union as such as well. So this is for the opening and maybe also enlightening what we have at our disposal. So that means when we talk about public perspective and not the political one, of course, the political is very much reflected in how public opinion is looking at this cooperation, but we could rely also on these surveys and to see what's happening and also try to find why is it happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gyarfásová. And now I would like to give floor to Mr. Braden Ebinger from Budapest and maybe present the Hungary's point of view on the matter.
Thank you very much for the invitation. As I promised you in my email, I'm presenting now the goals and priorities of the actual current Hungarian V4 presidency 21-22. The challenges and crises affecting Europe and the world, including the COVID-19 pandemic that has profoundly impacted all aspects of life, further increased the importance of the so-called V4 format. The Visegrad countries have helped each other in different challenges, which demonstrated the strengths of regional solidarity and cooperation. Collaboration during the current crisis and the following recovery can be a solid basis for successful cooperation in the next future. After the COVID-19 pandemic, it is the shared goal of the Visegrad countries to be among those who benefit from the global economic and political changes. With its population of 64 million, the V4 is an indispensable actor of the post-Brexit European Union, and as NATO and EU members, 30 years after the regime changes in Central and Eastern Europe, the V4 represents one of the most dynamic regions in the Union, based on based on high economic growth and employment, rapid digital transformation, and robust investment. The Visegrad countries feel responsible for Europe's future, preserving its values and principles and supporting the EU's further enlargement. We are interested in a stable and secure Europe, continuing V4 cooperation in addressing current challenges, for example, climate change, digital transformation, and migration. And Europe founded on values of respect of human dignity and human rights, fundamental freedoms, democracy, equality of the rule of law, with a thriving civil society and the free media, as well as a regional diversity and respect for shared values and principles. An Europe that fully utilizes the potential of green economy and digitalization to remain globally competitive in the 21st century. The Visegrad countries are ready to cooperate with the parallel Slovene and French, as well with the upcoming Czech presidencies of the Council of the European Union, with the 21 Hungarian presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, and the Polish chairmanship in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in 22. So let me present now the priorities of the current Hungarian presidency. There are 3 points: stability, reopening of the economy, and partnership. The main points of the program of the Hungarian presidency in stability, for example, is V4 coordination in the European Union. Then an important conference of the future of Europe. You know, there is now a so-called conference in the European countries about the future of the European Union. Multi-annual financial framework, the so-called next generation EU cohesion, security and stability in migration, border protection, and the so-called Schengen area, tackling the pandemic, crisis management, interior affairs, and so on. The most important priority is to reopening the economy. For example, economic policy, financial cooperation, energy and climate policy, transport and mobility, digitalization, and so on. In the society, it's very important to reopen the tourism. Then an important issue is the international Visegrad Fund that we heard. It's demographic problems, we have it in our countries, culture, and for young people, for students, higher education. And last but not least, health, COVID and other problems we have now in our region. Excuse me. The third priority is partnership. Partnership between the parliaments of the V4, European V4 cooperation with partners in the Western Balkan, cooperation with Eastern Partnership countries, and relations between diplomats of the V4. Global V4 cooperation, V4 international development cooperation, and so on. These are the main priorities of Hungarian presidency, V4 presidency for the next year. Yes, and I'm open for questions from the students in the next half an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. I believe that discussing about successful of each presidencies could be an individual topic for discussion. But now allow me to give space also for questions from our participants. Mr. Kasper asked whether the V for success defined as a common road to EU. It was possible because of shared interest. And the question is, how could we define and try to name future goals which are common to every V4 members? And Mr. Kasper wanted to know what is the perspective from the Austria on this matter. But I would maybe connect it to the second question from Vanessa, who asked about if we, as citizens of Visegrad countries, are satisfied with the development and positions of V4 on international level. Furthermore, she's also interested to Mr. Schaffer's opinion, as well as Austria is one of the biggest economic partner to V4 countries. So the floor is yours, Mr. Schaffer.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good questions. I think that also responding to my previous speakers, what they have mentioned in their interventions, I believe that the common interest, that shared interest on a European level should be to develop the European governance and to reform the institutions, to make them fit so that we don't need more and more of these minilateral formats. And I'm not against it. And the 3 Cs initiative is certainly an interesting minilateral format. But I hear very often that the added value is that the US is providing money, so we should exploit that. And I often ask myself, why are we not providing a better suited institutional framework on a European Union level so that we don't need these regional formats? I have published a policy paper actually in the Think Visegrad network. I was one of the fellows. It's a very, very good and very relevant program with the 8 partners, the institutions in there. And my suggestion is in this reform of the institutional setup that we put more emphasis not on the nation states, but on the regions. And then you have smaller entities within the framework of European Union governance that are participating in the decision-making process. And there is less need for ever newly upcoming minilateral formats to coordinate here. One thing that is certainly a dire need to be included in this reform is that we acknowledge that the European Union of 2021 is vastly different than the European Union of before 2004. And therefore, we need to much better include countries of Central and Eastern Europe and anywhere in the European Union into the institutional decision-making. You see how the top jobs are filled. When we look alone at President of the European Commission from Germany, the High Representative for the Common Foreign and Security Policies from Spain, we have the President of the European Council from Belgium, etc., etc., etc. So these are all pre-2004, and in the extreme case, if we include, for instance, also the President of the European Parliament, founding members of the European Union. We have no new agencies located to the area of Central and Eastern Europe. We should not necessarily have to talk about the relocation of the big institutions, although that might also be a gesture. But nevertheless, I mean, we have the necessity to relocate now the, unfortunately, in these times, very prominent European Medical Agency. And where do we give it to? A funding member of the European Union. So we need to create a better inclusiveness on a European level that includes also the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, which hopefully, it's not a guarantee, but hopefully might lead to also less divisions and less possibilities to exploit this narrative. Brussels is over there. And we had one priority in our foreign policy that we could not determine because we were not a member of the European Union. From becoming independent after 1990 until joining the European Union. And so there is no wonder that there is a certain dissatisfaction with the development on a European level. And I can only hope that, for instance, also the new German government finally acknowledges that it's not the decision between Paris and Berlin that shapes the future of the European Union, but it should be a decision of the capitals in all the different regions on a European Union level. Whereas Austria in this, to briefly answer also this question, this narrative of being a bridge builder between East and West, that was the case before Austria joined the European Union, before the Iron Curtain came down, is also something that is done in nowadays European Union. And I think that the Austrian foreign policy is very much aware of the necessity to strengthen good neighbourly relations, not only with countries that are not yet a EU member, namely the countries of the Western Balkans, but also especially the countries that are surrounding Austria. And one can only hope that this bridge builder is not only a nice metaphor, a nice visual saying, but it has actually the potential to be implemented and bring Western Europe and Central Europe closer together in a will of tackling the actual institutional challenges that the European Union has, because then afterwards it becomes easier to tackle the topical challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we could hear another opinions on the future goals of each state of V4 and its positions. Maybe Ms. Kizekova.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the remarks. It's a tricky one with the regards, first of all, the question of whether we're happy with the development and formulation of goals. Well, when I'm looking at the I'm reflective, obviously we are not happy in all aspects about how we evolved and all the aspects that missed opportunities to collaborate. And that, obviously, if you ask some civil servants in the Czech Republic, mind you, they would probably say, let's forget it and just focus on bilateral relations. And as our colleague said, in Europe in a broader sense, or create our own ties, not necessarily always find joint interests within V4. There is another layer of this. Asymmetrically, we are weaker than quite a few players that we are interacting with. And so being together on certain points helps us. And we do have some unique aspects of our even economic makeup for countries, shared manufacturing and so forth. From outside countries that is spread out across border gives us a bit push to actually have shared interests in terms of facilitating, as I said, infrastructure projects and working with these outsiders under the V4 Plus format. I understand that maybe Austria cannot understand the idea of us wanting to have a V4 Plus, and in a way for Hungary, if I can use the term, this is a sort of mantra on steroids, V4 Plus, V4 Plus, V4 Plus to work with France, V4 Plus with Korea, with Japan. It's actually a natural reaction for us to do that because some countries actually welcome this, to have meetings with this space specifically, separately from other interactions. So I envision there is a shared interest to continue with this, because we do have feedback from Japan, South Korea, or India, and some of them are in some respects like-minded countries for us when we talk about the codes of rules of order, or pretty much economically how we want to interact in a global economy, that we have shared interests with these players. And so they are the ones who say, let's collaborate in this V4 Plus format and continue with that setup and create common shared interests and goals through that. The problem is that we don't always articulate the expectations from what they expect and what our countries expect from this kind of collaborations and amongst ourselves. I'd like to see V4 be more transient and just really focus on the future of Europe. But when we were in Brussels, it was clear from the discussion on a conference of Future of Europe with public and the surveys still that there is not enough clarity what the future of Europe will be per se. So even for us, the Czech government has hard time to plan priorities for the Czech presidency because we can predict the findings of this conversation with public on the future of Europe. So the NGOs often spearhead these conversations, and there is not enough transparency between governments. So it's hard to ask sometimes, what do you want to have as shared goals? To me, it is often diversification of the supply chains. We agree on some of these aspects. There is a shortened length between accessing resources, but it is a competitive space. We have to be realistic. As much as we want to have that as a shared interest, it is competitive for us. And so we will put it down on a paper, but we will all compete for opportunities. Obviously, one of the shared interests is the fight with climate change. I think some people are very passionate about this topic, and I hope that will continue. And I don't know what we're going to do about protecting some of our biodiversity and natural ecosystems. So those topics we can definitely agree on. We can also agree on topics of fighting disinformation and hybrid security threats, and making our institutions more resilient. Mind you, we are all connected online. People can really vouch for our defense systems, what we have at home as a Wi-Fi and so forth. So that is a big task for the governments as well as a shared interest to have security of the cyberspace. And that we can also agree on, even with the outside partners. So there are certain areas, and like I said, the Czechs are formulating priorities for their presidency, and some of these topics will come up, I think, as priority areas for the EU as a whole.
Thank you. So we can agree on that. You think the future of the topic within the climate crisis related to V4 can be in terms of joint solutions. Great, that's answer for one of our questions from YouTube. Maybe Mrs. Olga, what do you think about the future goals, or maybe I would like to ask specific questions about if the V4 could be more institutionalized and to create cooperation on the higher level, and with the prospect for maybe for its relations.
Okay, very short answer to this deeper institutionalization of V4. I don't think it's necessary, and my personally, okay, so my voice is not relevant in this case, but in this academic debate, I could say that I would not be in favor of this, and I think that how it's organized until today it's okay and it's enough. But very shortly to the question, which I think was written earlier about the satisfaction. So if I'm satisfied being the V4 citizen or citizen of one of the V4 countries, and I think that satisfaction is always measured towards your expectations. So what were your expectations? And I think that here really the original, the initial objectives of Visegrad cooperation were accomplished. And I think we discussed it within our course or my talk that it was really very difficult in early 1990s to think about how this legacy of 40 years of communism will be overcome and how the integration process will be accomplished. And I think that this process was successful, so it took longer than maybe we expected at the beginning, but okay. Since 2004, so really I see that the interests of Visegrad countries are not so shared once this primary objective is not there. So there is a lot of different interests, different political initiatives, and I think that also to see or to expect that now the V4 will be one political entity speaking with one voice would not be correct or would not be satisfactory for all the countries. So we see that, yes, some prime ministers, and it was said already, are trying to hijack the V4 brand or to V4 cooperation and try to speak in one voice representing V4 countries. And there is certain reluctance or ambiguity how to deal with that from the other countries. Very recently, I was invited to have comments or to debate one book which was published very recently. Maybe Mr. Schäfer knows it. It's entitled V4 Connection, Herausforderungen für Europa by Klaus Legevi and his Polish co-author. And I have to say that reading this book, I definitely was not satisfied because I saw that the V4 is more perceived from outside. Yes, this is a German author in Germany published book, but still I think that the view from outside is not differentiating enough among V4 countries, and that we really have to be concerned about the backsliding of democracy in Hungary and Poland, and maybe yes, so Visegrad maybe could be also a platform, but I have some doubts if it's possible to make some correctives and to send also some signals that some developments or steps or activities are not in accordance of rule of law and European values. My last comment is, and it's also in several questions, what is the future of Visegrad? What are the perspectives? You might know that after the Hungarian presidency, which ends in summer next year, Slovakia is taking over. And I'm sure that the future will depend very much on how the domestic developments in V4 countries will continue. So we have a change in executive, in government in Czech Republic. So we will see if the new Prime Minister Petr Fiala will be closer to what Václav Klaus represented 15 years ago. So that means to have Visegrad cooperation on distance more than in being really very enthusiastically involved. And I think that the big puzzle for the future of Visegrad is or will be the outcome of the Hungarian election next spring. And so I think that this will be a crossroad for how it will develop for the future.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jarfášová. Now, I would like to ask Professor Brad Nebinger, do you think that current Hungarian presidency will or is strengthening relations between V4 states, and or if it is actually more dangerous for Visegrad reputation on international level? Excuse me, sorry, you have to turn on your microphone first.
Yeah, okay. I would like to ask you, ask the student, what does it mean dangerous for him or for her?
Well, maybe related to lacking of rule of law in Hungary and the freedom of speech and press.
Yes. As we know and you know, Hungary has a government, right-wing government since 11 years. But you have to know that in the years between 2002 and 2010, we had a so-called left-wing government, for us a post-communist government. And the old constitution was a Stalinistic constitution from 1949. This constitution was had some modifications in 89, 90, in the political change time. But for the next 30 years, for the next 20 years, excuse me, from 90 to 2010, this constitution couldn't work because of the so-called post-communist history of this constitution. In 2010, the Fidesz and KDNP coalition, they won the election by a 2/3 majority. So they had the first time after the political change, the opportunity to give us a new constitution. The new constitution, that's right, is more or less very conservative, with much problems. We had it today. I repeated in the question, rule of law. Then another problem is the new media, old media law, and so on. But you have to know that 2/3 of the Hungarian population, they voted in 14 and in 18 for the same government and for 2/3 majority. So I think in the European Union and in Visegrad cooperation, we have to respect the voters, yeah, and the results of voting. So in my point of view, these problems we have it today in the European Union with rule of law, with media and other problems, with migration, is one of the main, questions. We have it now in a very hard campaign, political campaign in Hungary between the left coalition of 6 parties and the current government, Fidesz. And the results in the next election in spring, in April, we will see. So these two part of the Hungarian policy today, they are now very closed in the so-called aspects of the new coalition next year, the new election next year. Thank you.
Yes, I've seen, thank you very much, Professor. I've seen that Mr. Schaffer probably doesn't really agree with what was being said, so
yeah,
it's yours.
Yeah. Okay.
Professor, with all due respect, a small remark. It's not 2/3 of the population of Hungary who voted for Fidesz.
Of the voters.
The electoral system that created a 2/3 majority. And a political possibility to change the constitution is always there. What you mentioned is it was the first time for a single party to dictate what is written in the constitution. And if this is a good thing, well, different discussion. I just wanted, because I saw a comment regarding the question of better governance for Eastern Europe. I think I need to make myself more clear. I think the European Union needs better governance. We all can use better governance in all our countries. Some need it more, some need it a little bit less. Better governance is needed globally, but especially when it comes to the European Union. So this is the point. I'm not saying that Eastern Europe specifically needs that. No, the European Union needs a better governance. And I am also not advocating against the V4. I think the V4 has a fantastic tradition, has a fantastic track record, but then was sort of hijacked and transformed in the public perception, especially in Western Europe, as this anti-European, Eurosceptic club fighting against values. And this is a bad thing. And this should be changed. What I am saying is we don't need, and this is a comment that was also raised on YouTube, if I saw it correctly, we don't need additional minilateral formats. And V+4 for certain areas, great. But why do we have additional minilateral formats that do not provide a real added output and benefit for the whole goal, which should be working together on the European level? So having smaller entities coordinating, preparing decisions is a good thing. But we have 14 to 20 something minilateralisms where countries of the European Union, EU member countries are participating. And almost half of them have been funded in the last 5 years. And that hasn't certainly led to a better European governance. And that I am very skeptical about, not about the V4 format as a general format.
Yes, could I have a short reaction? Mr. Schaffer, you know that the Fidesz government won in 2010 the elections by the old constitution and by the old election law. It's you're right when you are saying that in 14 and 18, it was a new constitution and a new election law. This law is similar to the British one. Yeah? To have, how to say it in English, the relative majority in the voters. And this law will be, how to say it, a basis for the next election. But excuse me, in Austria, you have many scandals, your government, yeah, in 17, Strache, and now Mr. Kurz in this year. So I don't think that Austria is in a good or better government situation. Excuse me.
I'm not saying this. By the way, I'm German.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not representing the Austrian government.
Yes.
But it doesn't make it better that we have other countries within the European Union that lack maybe or are in need of better European governance. It doesn't make it better if other countries are even worse in that.
Okay, I'm agree with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the discussion. Now, Mrs. Kizekova would like to add something, so the floor is yours.
I don't want to add, I actually want to move on to another question, if it's okay. There was a question about China, which I think the way it's formulated is not correct. So I want to clarify. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so there is this sort of suggestion that V4 countries pledge to deepen political mutual trust with China, and how does that affect the differences in terms of interest with the rest of EU? Actually, they didn't. I don't know where that was stated or when that happened. If you can see, the current ties between China and Czech Republic are very cold, because we had a visit of the Speaker of Senate in Taiwan, where he declared he was Taiwanese. And obviously, Beijing did not take that very lightly. And both Czech Republic and Slovakia have had visits from the foreign minister from Taiwan, and have engaged in further discussions on future collaboration. All this actually plays very vividly among think tankers as well as the governments to actually reassess ties with China. The only country that is somewhat cautious and asks for patience and more consideration for multi-vectoral foreign policy is Hungary, because of the there definitely is more engagement and effort to diversify ties. But even my Hungarian colleague from IFAD, which is very closely as a think tank linked to the MFA, voiced that Hungary is still committed to finding a European way. The problem is Brussels has not always been clear as to what the red lines are when it comes to economic interactions. And then we see our partners from, let's say, Germany have bilateral trade deals with China that are outside of the EU. And also the Indo-Pacific strategies that are being formulated. France and Germany, that has a guideline, not a strategy, diverge in their approach. France is more, wants to exclude China more, while Germany has more inclusive approach. So all this is happening, but I would not argue at all that we want to deepen political mutual trust. We are actually participating in the Indo-Pacific discussions, and the strategic concept of Indo-Pacific does not include China in considerations. There is more distancing to showcase China, that the codes of conduct, not just in South China Sea, are not accepted by international community, and also the way the business deals with the interference of the state government in our region are not with the EU guidelines or standards always. So I would say, and another example is the latest withdrawal of Lithuania from 16+1 collaboration, which doesn't necessarily mean that all of us will pack our backpacks and will leave this framework, but it means that there is more stress on that being a symbolic in value rather than have tangible results. So that's just my quick remark.
Thank you very much. I would just like to remind that we are slowly running out of time. So Vanessa, please, if you want to ask, the floor is yours.
Yeah. If I may, my bad, it was my question and I apologize for generalizing. I was mostly thinking about Hungary and Poland because recently China is extending its soft power in Eastern, but also in Central Europe through the Belt and Road Initiative. And again, I apologize for generalizing. I was not aware of the Czech situation of the Slovak one. I was most interested about Hungary and Poland, as China did a lot of investitions in recently, especially in Hungary, also in Romania and this region, especially.
If I may, even Poland, even Poland is on our side when it comes to with reassessment, and I wouldn't argue that Poland is happy with how many results they had with China. Trust me, we've just had this conversation here in Prague with partners from all countries, and there was definitely a sentiment of disillusion and not trying to create more. Actually, there is a lot of mistrust, not political trust. So, yeah.
Especially after the election of Joe Biden, the relation between Poland and the United States are not the same as before. So I thought it would be a change also in Chinese and Polish relations, but I think I'm wrong. So thank you for clarifying.
I'm sorry for interrupting the debate, but we are slowly heading to the end of today's discussion. So I would like to give a floor once again to every speaker for closing remarks in very shortly, maybe in 2-3 sentences. And maybe we could start with Mrs. Schäfer.
Very well, thank you very much. Interesting, diverse topics. Need to further probably discuss potentials here, and my summary would be use existing formats successfully as it has been in the past, like the V4, to foster better European governance and avoid whataboutism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kizekova.
Thank you. I think this conversation should continue. So this is a good start for us. And I'd like to hear more in the future, actually, what the students have to say about how they envision the future of V4. And I don't agree that we should put the burden on younger people to work out all the solutions. I think we need to use our vote to vote in people that are capable to provide the solutions and represent us better and change the narrative of V4 being a troublemaker. So I think that's the only way, is to vote and participate in elections and then shape the V4 as constructive player.
Thank you very much. The program actually continues with workshop where participants will have the chance to express their opinions. So maybe we could send you some report from today's workshop if you're interested. And now, Mrs. Gyarfasova, if I may ask you.
Yes, I would be definitely interested. So send it to me. So we are now starting the debate about the priorities of the Slovak presidency for next year. So, and So my impression from this debate and also from the lecture I had earlier is very positive. So I'm really very glad that Visegrad is alive for you, for young generation, that you would like to involve, that you are interested and you are able to ask very smart questions. And so I think this is the future. So thank you very much for inviting me for both events.
Thank you very much. Also, Professor Brateneminger, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm positive about the future of V4, and I'm agree with Ms. Jarfashova because the students know it better. There are many cooperation conferences and other things between the students in our 4 countries. And that makes it positive for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also. So we have come to the end of today's panel discussions, and therefore I would like to thank all of you who contributed and enriched the discussion, mainly to our guests and speakers who expressed their opinions and expertise on the matter, but also to every participant who participated and asked questions. Let me, at the end, thanks also to our partner organizations in Visegrad Youth Forum, Institute for Danube Region and Central Europe from Vienna, Junior Diplomat Initiative from Prague, Forum of Youth Diplomats from Warsaw, and House of European Affairs and Diplomacy from Budapest. Also, I would like to thank to our financial support for the project to NATO Public Diplomacy and International Visegrad Fund as well, to our only institutional partner, the Faculty of Political Science and International Relations. I hope we will see again, maybe in the next year. I wish you all the best, stay healthy, and I'm looking forward to another part of the project. Participants, please join to the workshop link at 5 minutes. So thank you once again and all the best.
Thank you
very much.
bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Goodbye.